Mr. Speaker, the identity of potential foster parents is often considered an important factor in the placement of Indigenous children. According to a Stats Can report released just yesterday, in Western provinces, Alberta had the lowest proportion, at just 29%, of these children living with at least one Indigenous foster parent. To the Minister of Indigenous Relations, what current initiatives are you undertaking in this government to increase the number of these children placed with at least one Indigenous foster parent?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for the question. This ministry believes very fundamentally in the philosophy of Indigenous children residing with Indigenous foster parents, and as a result we've had many meetings with chiefs and councils from across the province to talk about the process of bringing foster parents up to speed so that they can take on children from their own communities. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, a lot of improvement to go from 29%. Given that today's Supreme Court ruling in Daniels versus Canada that Métis and non-status Indians are indeed Indians affirms federal responsibility for Indigenous peoples, and given that in the past Alberta filled the breach in providing requisite services with little or no help from the federal government, again to the Minister, what will you do to ensure that Alberta receives its fair share of support from the federal government for continued provision of necessary programs and services for all Indigenous people in Alberta?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much to the member for the question. Alberta is very proud to have been ahead of the curve on the issues that have been brought forward under the Daniels decision. We are the only province in the country who has settlement lands assigned for Métis people. We have signed recently the consultation agreement with the settlement people, and we are also looking at a consultation agreement with the non-settlement people. We are ahead of this. We are working very hard, and we are going to be working with the federal government for tripartite arrangements.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Seconds up for that.
Mr. Speaker, according to the most recent Human Services Child Intervention data, there were over 72,000 people who received child intervention services in Alberta. Given that 34% were Indigenous, despite making up only 6.2% of Alberta's population, what is the Human Services Minister currently doing to decrease this number, and how will he ensure that he addresses the needs of Indigenous peoples across Alberta?
Minister of Human Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, member, for a very important question. And certainly our Indigenous children are overrepresented in our system, and that's a cause for concern across Canada. Even this morning, I spoke to my federal counterpart exactly around this issue. We are working with our Indigenous partners, Indigenous communities, and federal counterpart to make sure that we put in right supports for the Indigenous people so that we can decrease the number of people in our care.
Honourable Minister.